Hello, this is Dr. Jamie Mathias, Executive Director of MASBA, the Mexican American School Boards Association. Excited to have you with us here today. MASBA is celebrating its 50th anniversary, birthed in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement in 1970. We are continuing to celebrate that we are closing gaps now for 50 years here in our Texas public schools. You may know we are doing a special webinar series on the occasion of our 50th anniversary. And today's webinar series comes from a partner of MASBA. They had come to us in 2016 saying, we want to sponsor MASBA, but at a level unheard of, such that we've given them a different distinction. Instead of calling them sponsors, we refer to them as our partner, and that is TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards. We want to thank today our presenter from the Texas Association of School Boards Facility Services. Today we have with us Jeff Clemens, who's going to be speaking with us on the impact of facilities on student achievement. As superintendents and school board members, we wonder what impact facilities have on student performance, which for us is one of the key indicators that we track as districts. And so without further ado, we turn over to Jeff Clemens of TASB Facility Services to talk with us about the impact of facilities on student achievement. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it and appreciate you having me today, and looking forward to talking about a topic that all of us should be extremely interested in. And so we'll just go ahead and we'll dive right into the question of, do school facilities impact student achievement? And to give you a quick breakdown, we're going to be looking at really multiple different topics in covering kind of the role of facilities. But the role of facilities really geared toward two different gaps that we see in our public schools. First, the opportunity gap. This is what is often referred to as the input gap, meaning the unequal or inequitable distribution of resources and opportunities. And when we talk about resources and opportunities, today we'll be talking about them from a facility standpoint. Secondarily, we'll be talking about the achievement gap, or often referred to as the output gap, the unequal or inequitable distribution of educational results and benefits, which we find in our schools as well. But before we get moving into this particular topic, I want to give you a little facility background. You know, there's over 100,000 public school facilities throughout the U.S. You may or may not be aware that here in Texas, we have just over 9,000 campuses in the state of Texas. So when you talk about those school facilities and related campuses throughout the U.S., I mean, we make up almost 10% of those facilities. And you know, at the end of the day, you know, a lot of people don't understand that the average facility here in Texas is over 40 years old. That number has been consistently dropping as our state continues to grow and add about 80,000 school students each year. But we have a lot of facilities in the state of Texas. And in general, from a national standpoint, about 53% of public schools, they need some money spent on repairs, renovations, and modernization to bring them up to today's standards. And you're looking at over $197 billion from a national standpoint, which comes out to about $4.5 million per school. And that might not seem like a large number to many districts that are on the larger end in Texas, but we need to step back and we need to realize that of the 1,025 or so school districts in the state of Texas, about 400 of those have less than 500 kids total, and only about 100 have more than 10,000 kids. So we have a huge disparity from a size standpoint. In many of the smaller school districts, for $4.5 million, you could pretty much build a building to house the entire district. So just kind of keeping that in perspective. And let's just jump into some of the history and the background and research that has been done. You know, a study was done by Calvin Bullock in Virginia related to middle school students, and it's the relationship between the school building condition and student achievement, which is exactly what we're talking about today. And what is fascinating about this study, and if anyone's interested in having the studies, or I can send them out to anyone who's interested in this topic following the webinar here today. But it's important as we go through and study the facilities that we take into consideration the socioeconomic status of the students attending. And so, and looking at the percentage, really one of the quickest or easiest and most effective ways to do this is to look at students that are participating in free and reduced lunch programs. And when you divide the facilities up between standard and substandard, you're looking at a 6.1% difference. And this is noteworthy because in English alone, because this affects all other academic areas. Even in order to learn science or math, as you know, that proficiency in English, which is an area that we talk about from an achievement and opportunity standpoint related to our English as a second language and English language learners, the ESL and ELL populations. You can take this idea of good facilities to help them on both the opportunity and achievement gap to increase their scores across the board. We have to first, from a Hispanic children's standpoint, and this is from the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, we've got to be honest first and recognize that we need to reduce the disparities across schools in the quality standpoint. Obviously, here it talks about experience, credentials, and professional training of teaching staff, but we also have to provide facilities that strengthen college planning and expectation. You know, a lot of school officials out there think of the facility as just kind of the place where education occurs. But the facility is so much more than the place where it occurs. The facility can actually enhance the whole process of education and learning for our students. And also from the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators is a big focus on promoting the value of technical and vocational education as meaningful. Now, why is that important? That's important because when we are looking at your vocational and technical education, those classrooms don't look like your standard classroom. That's not an 800 square foot room with desks in it, with 24, 26 desks, whatever the case may be. These are specialized locations for specialized learning. And we'll look at some examples of these vocational areas as we go through the presentation this morning. And here's a fascinating study that it was, solely focused on school facilities. And it talks about the importance of improving from the school facilities to improve student outcomes. And what's fascinating here, they talk about acoustics, noise, air quality, lighting. You'll see here natural daylight. I've got that in red font because it's important that there's studies out there that show that students with the most exposure to natural daylight progress 20% faster in math and 26% faster in reading. Now stop and think about that. That is a huge differential. It's not a 1 or a 1.2% faster. That is a huge growth in the results of then compared to those taught in environments with the least amount of natural light. And we'll talk a little bit, technology has come a long way, and we're going to touch on shortly how we can improve this even in your facilities without much natural daylight. Proper temperature and control of temperature is important. You know, when you go into a classroom, my daughter, for instance, she takes a coat to school every day because she knows she's going to be cold when she's sitting in the classroom. Well, what that does is that takes the mind off of learning and puts it onto How am I going to keep warm? How am I going to get comfortable? And it's a distraction. And so that is a function of the facility. But what's fascinating, what is really most important about this particular study is that classrooms with adequate space to reconfigure seating arrangements facilitate the use of different teaching methods. Even, I mentioned a while ago about vocational and agricultural and technical educational areas. It's important that we are creating spaces that allow for different types of teaching, different areas of teaching, different um, curriculums. When we talk about welding, when we talk about 3D mapping, when we get into the vocational end of things, it's such a wide range that we need to make sure that we have those locations in our facilities that can accommodate that. And then also creating private study areas, as well as smaller learning centers to reduce those interruptions. And I mentioned on temperature and control of temperature just a minute ago. That's a mental interruption. So making sure that we are maintaining the environment in our facilities at a comfortable level for all. And because this is positively related to student development and achievement. The walls speak. This is another fascinating story, and I'll just touch on this one. But the results confirmed the hypothesis that school climate plays a mediating role in the relationship between facility quality and student achievement. Now, what's interesting here is many in schools who aren't on the operations and maintenance or construction side of the equation at our school facilities, well, they think that our HVAC systems are going to last forever. Today's standard, take for instance a split system HVAC unit for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Typically what we have in our homes. This is also typically what we see in schools. And if those units, if that system lasts 16 years in one day, we have gotten our full expected use out of those units. And that is how we maintain through proper controls and facility maintenance the environment inside the building, which leads to a healthier, more effective, and efficient learning environment. Spatial configuration is big, like we talked about, noise, heat, cold. It all bears on the students' and teachers' ability to perform. Anytime there's a distraction, be it environmental, auditory, visual, it pulls the student's mind away from the education at hand. But what's fascinating is the age of the building. We'll see here in a minute kind of a different study, and I've just got a couple more of these to look at, but a different one that talks about that 49-year-old age of a building. But this study, and I tend to agree with it from a common sense standpoint, it means that the age of the building, a lot of people talk about we have old buildings. Well, just because they're old, that doesn't mean that it should be used as an indicator of the facility's impact on student performance. What's most important is how it is maintained. Is it in good condition? Has it been renovated? So a dirty building or a building that has not been properly maintained could affect and impact negatively the student performance. But regardless of the age of the facility, as long as it is maintained and it is clean and it has a comfortable environment, that's going to provide us with the environment most conducive to educational advancement. And there's a definite consensus out there on the research standpoint related to the positive effects of small school size, and it seems to be the strongest with students in lower socioeconomic groups. And when they say small school size, That's a relative term. We often find that it goes not only from the school facility itself, but all the way down to the class size. The smaller the class size, the more intimate the relationship between the student and the teacher, and the fewer distractions. So obviously that's going to result in a more efficient learning environment. And this is one specifically, I was hesitant not to show this one, or hesitant to show this one, I should say, simply because it's a A&M study, and I'm not sure how much we can trust information coming out of Texas A&M. I'm just kidding. This is a phenomenal study done by Mr. McGowan, and at the end of the day, the answer was yes. School facilities here in Texas, focused only here in Texas from this study standpoint, affect the education and learning environment and achievement of our kids. And school design and construction should focus on specialized learning spaces and other academic areas more than administrative support spaces. And that's from an increased teacher satisfaction standpoint. And if you look into a number of the studies that are out there, it talks a lot about teacher satisfaction when you're talking about the education and achievement of the students. Now you go, now why are we talking about teacher satisfaction? Because student achievement and teacher satisfaction and tenure are very close related together. We want to keep teachers that are good teachers. And if we keep teachers that are good teachers and we provide them a safe and effective, comfortable learning environment, we're going to win on all fronts. Now, the age and condition of Texas high schools as related to student achievement, I mentioned this one a while ago. The age of the school has an important impact if it's 49 years old. But the problem is there's nothing related. There's no negative correlation between schools over 49 years old and graduation rate. It's more effect of the condition of the facilities. And I think it's important that many times the community or the school says, well, that old building, it needs to go. Well, does it? Or can we, for a lower price, for fewer tax dollars, renovate that facility and put it in an excellent condition, which will thus provide the exact same results as if we put them in a brand new building? So it's something to keep in mind as you're working in your schools and thinking about facilities from this standpoint. Now, I mentioned on a couple of those studies about natural light. And for those of you who work with schools, whether it be on the board level or from a staff standpoint, or frankly, even both, the technology is now here. We talked about how important natural light is to the learning environment. Well, we now, with LEDs, we're matching natural light. And so many of our older facilities, they don't have the windows, or we have interior rooms that don't have the option for external light to raise the blinds and get sunlight into the classroom. But we can replicate that natural light using LEDs. And the reason why I wanted to touch on this is that it's something that, frankly, I think every school should look at doing. You're also looking at a 50% energy savings. In general, on your average old buildings, your lighting accounts for about 23% of your energy cost. If we can create a better learning environment and save money, I can't think of a better win-win for our members. And here's just a prime example of how the lighting difference is between after and before. And again, just wanted to show this to you because lighting plays a huge role in the achievement of our students and our facilities. And it's important to get the right lighting. I got a call from a superintendent about 2 weeks ago, and he said, we're doing a retrofit ourselves of LED lights, but he said, man, it is bright in there, it'll give you a headache. Well, the school wasn't educated in what type of light. They just thought, we'll go just buy some LEDs and we'll start installing them. Well, we need to make sure that we're getting those lights that mimic the sun. You know, there's a reason why the sun gives us the light it does. We need to mimic that light, those wavelengths, and we need to make sure that it's not too bright and creating almost a sterile environment. So let's look at some examples. Houston ISD back several years ago had a facility that they couldn't keep full. It was Ryan Middle School, and it was year in and year out an underperforming facility in Houston's 3rd Ward, and they needed to revitalize. They needed to keep students and keep them close to home instead of transferring to other facilities throughout the district. And so they teamed up with the Baylor College of Medicine and created the Academy at Ryan in Houston's 3rd Ward. Now, when you take your standard everyday older, as you can see, this facility is much older than 49 years old. But when you're going to make that change, how might the facility now look different being a College of Medicine Academy? You know, we want to address achievement. We want that output at the end to be higher. How are we going to change this facility from a standard classroom? Well, here's a few photos. We're going to need more lab areas. We're going to need more storage for the equipment that we're using. Microscopes, models of the human body. This is a prime example of how, if you want to get the achievement results out, if you're expecting a different end result, you can't use the same facility, the same building with the same typical classrooms to achieve that end result. Here's one from Austin ISD. I know Jamie's very familiar with here. The Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. I mean, this is a school, they took an old facility and decided to transition it to a female-only learning environment to provide rigorous academic and to challenge young women. Well, you're going to have to change the facility so that it meets the needs of the goal in mind. Oftentimes we hear from schools and districts that go, hey, we're going to add a magnet school, or we're going to create a new program, whether it be, for instance, we'll look at one on firefighting. We have to change the facility because the facility greatly impacts the end result from an achievement and opportunity standpoint. Now here's a couple of examples from Manor ISD that we'll run through. And this is addressing achievement. And Manor ISD has been, and they are here right outside of Austin, but they've kind of been on the forefront of some pretty front-end facility changes in planning for new facilities as they are going through a very fast growth cycle right now just outside of Austin, as you can imagine. But New Tech Middle School, innovative design, you see the bright lights, a lot of natural light coming in, whole lot of exterior windows there, bright colored furniture. And what do you notice about the furniture in this classroom at New Tech Middle School? It's all on wheels. This is not your typical classroom with desks laid out in a 4 by 6 rows and that are stuck to the floor from the wax last time around. No, these classrooms can be manipulated and moved around to accommodate a wide range of education. And something to think about as you plan not only your newer facilities, but also as we look to update the furniture and fixtures in older facilities. Here's another example at New Tech Middle School as well. And what's interesting about New Tech Middle School is that kids in the district apply to go to this school. But again, a lot of bright colored furniture, very bright environment, obviously with the technology there. And as you can see, even though we've got a lot of exterior lighting, we're providing LED lighting as well, which mimics the sun's rays coming into the building. Lagos Elementary is another prime example. This is an innovative design to use the hallway as educational space. The typical width of a hallway in your elementary schools is about 10 feet wide in a number of school facilities out there. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to create a facility that not only brought in all the natural light from the outside, but also allowed for interactive spaces and collaborative spaces between classrooms. And you can even see down there at the end of the hallway, there's a sink area and some cabinetry for the storing of supplies and things of that nature. And taking it one step further from a maintenance standpoint and just polishing the concrete instead of putting in floor tile that will one day have to be replaced and has to be waxed and things of that nature. But getting these collaborative spaces that now we have areas that can be used for any number of educational environments. And this is another thing they did at Lagos Elementary. There's a large group spaces for both students and staff. And this is actually the teacher's lounge. Now, I'm not sure how far you could take it at your district, but students feel like young adults, and we need to teach them how to act, how to behave. And so this is an opportunity to bring students into the teacher's lounge, to immerse them sometimes into just the conversations of teachers as they're taking their break. But it gives an opportunity to help elevate those students to go, hey, maybe I'll be interested in education one day. We obviously have a shortage of teachers. Anything we can do to promote that thought process in schools will go a long way to helping us kind of fill that void moving forward. Here's another example. Again, we talk about bright colors. We talk about open spaces. We have at Harps Bluff ISD addressing achievement. What else can we do to provide learning environments, whether it be small areas for kids to work together or with a teacher, and then those separate areas where they can study and read. Providing that space in the facilities for them to get away and sometimes learn at their own pace as well. And they've done a tremendous job here of developing facilities to help towards that end. And here's another one from Manor right down the road. I don't know, right now, I don't think many of us know how far the open concept or collaboration schools will go. But a number of schools are trying it, and this is why I applaud various districts who are getting outside of the box. The 21st century learning environment, I'm guessing, is going to be a little bit different from the 22nd learning environment because it's a heck of a lot different than the 20th century learning environment. We're consistently changing and trying out new things because we know, this is a proof that we know as educators, as facility planners, that the environment of the facility is affecting the educational environment. Now, I can tell you too, we have at these large open concept schools, the biggest issue we're having to deal with is noise, because noise is a distraction, and anytime you get a bunch of kids together, you're going to have noise. And so how do we deal with that? So we're learning as we go. These schools who are trying new things are learning as they go. And it'll be interesting to keep up and see as these new line of schools with the 21st century learning environment. I would like to see how the results are. Do we see that achievement at the end of the day that we're hoping to bridge the gap on? And here's another example, just a photo of the facility. And what's fascinating about this is, I'm not sure if you can notice it right off the bat, but if you look to the left, there's some shelves there. What they've done is they have combined the cafeteria and the library. And what is fascinating about this, another prime example, is that they have seen a huge increase in the number of students reading at lunch. They'll go over and grab some books, go to their lunch table and read, and they've noticed that the lunchtime is quieter because there's that respect for the library environment. And when you can get kids reading more when they don't have to, I mean, that's a win, any way you look at it. Here's another example at Decker Middle School, especially related here to many of the students we have across the state. Many districts are adding new programs, new cultural programs, such as the mariachi band. Well, mariachi instruments are of a different size and have different storage requirements, and they need their own space, just like the jazz band or the concert band or the marching band, whatever the case may be. We need to make sure that we are developing and changing our facilities to help at the end of the day, to help our students, provide them the best space to learn and grow in various areas. And then one of the things, and I'll say again shortly on another slide, but collegiate design, and we're seeing this across the state as schools build new secondary schools, is that creating almost like college-like environments in our facilities, because that takes away some of the fear of that going to college. When you go to high school in a facility that rivals many of the collegiate facilities around the state, that provides a comfort to the student. Obviously, we can't do that everywhere, but in our larger districts, we are providing that little boost to our students to say, hey, you can do it here, take it to the next level. And maintenance, again, as I mentioned earlier, is heavily linked to achievement. How clean, how maintained our facilities are, can't say enough how important it is and what a result that it provides and how much impact it provides on the student environment. Here's an example. Actually, this is from my daughter's school up the road here near Austin in Pflugerville. When you walk into this facility, and I've seen this at several schools. I've seen it at a number of high schools, but I haven't seen a whole lot of it down at the middle school level. And I ask myself, should we start pushing that down? to the middle school side. And what this is, it's a row of flags representing the colleges, universities, military branches that graduates have gone on to attend. And it's a daily reminder to our students that they too can achieve the next level in education and success. I mean, how hard is it to go in and put some braces in with some poles and start collecting and assembling flags from where our students have gone on to achieve at the next level? So I would encourage you, if you're not doing that, let's look at how you can't get much simpler when it comes to encouraging students than simply showing them what they can do. Now, the opportunity gap is closely related to achievement gaps, and we're going to talk a little bit, but I wanted to show you quickly some information related to the National Opportunity to Learn campaign. And the achievement gap between white students and Black and Latino students correlates to the opportunity gap. So what the opportunity gap, like we mentioned earlier, is the input. There's a disparity in access to quality schools, resources needed for academic success, such as early childhood education, highly prepared and effective teachers. Remember, we were talking earlier about how do we keep our teachers? Well, we keep our good teachers by providing them good, safe, secure facilities that are properly maintained. But the disparity in access is also related to college preparatory curricula, equitable instructional resources, and frankly, expectations. If we, like we just saw on the last slide, if we put in our facilities the expectation that our students go on to higher education, then we're going to get that result. And that is a prime example of how we can use our facilities to get that rolling. Here's an example from Edinburgh, CISD, the School-Based Health Center. They teamed up with, excuse me, a Doctors Hospital of Renaissance Health Service System down in the Valley, and created this school-based health center that is staffed by physicians, nurses, counselors, and other healthcare practitioners. In addition, they've collaborated to ensure those who use the program have access to a much larger system of healthcare. If we need kids in the classroom to teach them, which is an obvious answer, yes, then being able to effectively treat them quickly gets them back in the classroom. And also our teachers and our staff having a place to where, you know, if you schedule a doctor's appointment at your local doctor, it's going to take a couple of hours sometimes to get over there and see them. But if we can just have them run over to the healthcare center here, get back to the classroom, back to educating our students, that's how we can impact achievement and opportunity of our students, by providing them the healthcare necessary. And I'll tell you, those are going to be some pretty specialized facilities that are needed to do that as well. Here's another example from an achievement standpoint and opportunity standpoint. You know, you can go to Pflugerville ISD and graduate from the high school ready to become a fireman, or along the path, well along the path to becoming an EMT. Both are in high demand, both are needed, both can help us address achievement, because these kids who participate in these programs have to have a higher level of GPA, which provides that incentive for that extra work to get that achievement on the front end, and then opportunity on the back end to go directly into a field. But these kinds of programs don't need your typical facilities. We've got to make sure that our facilities are changed and modified to address the needs of new programs. Here's another example. Career and technology, addressing opportunity, the new ag facilities. You know, many times schools may pass a bond or find funds for educational facility construction or renovation, but we hire contractors and we say, hey guys, get after it. Let us know, give us the key when you're done. Let's look at our facilities and find out, where can we use students? Where can we plug in students into the construction and renovation process? That doesn't mean they have to be running wiring and connecting HVAC systems, but things such as building pins, and this is exactly what Maynard did. They used this opportunity to bring in students overseen by a contractor and a teacher to help put the pins together. I mean, when you get that hands-on learning of trades, that hands-on learning of how to weld, how to bolt things together, who knows what kind of minds that could get interested in those hands-on trades, and that may take it to the next level. You know, approximately 60% of public school students are classified as economically disadvantaged, and that we've seen over the past 5 years, the number of students participating, actually 4 years, from 2016-17, the number of students participating in career and technology education, also known as CTE, has increased by more than 60%. Both of these are, first one, economically disadvantaged. That's kind of shocking. But secondarily, providing those students that may or may not have the opportunity for college, we're providing them as schools the opportunity to learn a trade, to find a career in technical education. And it's no longer, you know, what it used to be. When I was in school back in the 80s and 90s, you know, career and technical education was basically shop, where we learned to work on engines and vehicles and motors and things of that nature, or agriculture. Or every now and then there was enough students for a carpentry class, but that was pretty much the extent of the continuing education that we used to have. Today, it's a completely different world. We're using and planning our facilities to provide veterinary science, college-style setups. You know, if we're going to teach veterinary science, we're going to need a particular type of classroom. We're going to need to plan around hands-on learning and interactive spaces. Another example would be cosmetology. Talk about a completely different type of facility or learning environment. We've got to have areas that are specifically designed to meet the needs of a coming program. Fabrication labs. You know, when we talked earlier about vocational areas not looking like your average everyday classroom, well, these locations, these fabrication labs have 3D printers, movable furniture, doors that can be opened up, because maybe this semester we're doing 3D printing and engineering and robotics, and the next semester we're looking at carpentry, electrical, automotive. Now we've planned ahead and we can bring those vehicles straight into the lab. So that types of planning, getting ready for what we want to teach, how we want to address achievement, how we want to break down those opportunity barriers. We've got to plan early on, anytime we're going to start a design or renovation project. Now, here's an example, Edgewood ISD in South San Antonio. Oh, sorry, went too far. They had an interest from students in developing and creating a robotics classroom, and they needed space to do this. Our facilities are impacting our achievement. Our facilities are impacting our opportunity. So they went in and renovated some, actually merged several classrooms together to get the space, went and did some electrical work, put in some workstations, and now they have a thriving robotics program that is growing from a recognition standpoint throughout the state, all by using our facilities and planning ahead and giving these students now, many of which have the know-how to go the vocational route and technical route from an automotive, a computer, or robotics standpoint, or now have an interest in engineering and want to follow that course on into college to a career on that side. But when you look at programs like robotics and every other educational program, we've got to think about how our facilities are going to help us achieve it. And this is something, an example of what I think is important for a lot of schools to keep in mind. Facilities today are highly engineered, highly planned, state-of-the-art facilities. Even our mechanical rooms from the 60s and 70s are fascinating with all the pipes and electrical and pumps and tanks. Do we ever use our facilities? Do we ever tour our facilities with our students to have maintenance? Not only to utilize the staff that we already have on board, utilize their knowledge of our facilities. Let's bring them in, a couple of times a year to do some walkthroughs with interested students or classes, to walk through the facility and look at the engineering and the robotics and the technology. Do we have mechanical rooms that we always shut them off from the view of students? Why don't we put plexiglass in the walls? Why don't we put doors with windows so that kids can look into the maintenance areas, into the technology areas? Here on the left, having the servers, that fascinates me. Having it right out there to where everybody who walks by looks at it and goes, what is that? What kind of curiosity would that build? What kind of curiosity would it build to put some windows up next to our risers for our fire alarm system for kids to look at? That's an easy, highly inexpensive way to create some curiosity in our kids. And if your district doesn't have facilities that are open or that it's easily done in your facilities, I tell you what, I bet there's one within 10 miles of your district that would be glad to open their doors. So think about that as you talk to your principals, as you talk to your maintenance and operations. How proud would your maintenance team be to show off their facilities to the students? And a parting thought. I know we've covered a lot of information, but we're reaching the end of our time here. There's a recent headline in Central Texas. This said, blank ISD, superintendent discusses repurposing 5 campuses, possible nonprofit partnership to save the schools. And the article said that all 5 schools have failed state academic standards for 5 consecutive years or more. If the 5 schools don't meet state accountability ratings in May, a 2015 law, many of which y'all are familiar with, requires the campuses to close of the district's elected school board to be replaced with state appointees. What would you do if this was your district? Would you overlook the tremendous impact that school facilities themselves play in the important responsibility to help close the achievement and opportunity gaps? Would you disregard not only some of the research, and there's a ton of research out there I encourage you to go look at, but would you not take the opportunity to take a second look at your facilities, and can we find out how can we use our facilities? How can we change our facilities to help our educators, to help our administrators, to bring these 5 campuses up to state academic standards? We often forget about these facilities. We often focus 100% on education and curriculum, and those are very important. But we also have to step back and look at where that teaching, where that curriculum is being put out there to our students, because it has a huge impact. Our facilities have a huge impact on the learning environment. And with that, I will wrap it up. If anybody has any questions they'd like to throw out there, if you'd like additional information, if you would like to discuss a topic that is near and dear to my heart and I'm passionate about, I'd love to visit with you. And here's my information for you. And then I will hand it right back over to Jamie.
Tremendous, Jeff. Before we leave, we want to get you to speak briefly about TASB facility services and what it is that y'all are able to do for districts. But before that, I just want to say what was so marvelous about this presentation. Here at MASBA, we are focused on closing gaps in our Texas public schools, and we know that there are opportunity and achievement gaps that we need to be overcoming. So for you to be addressing both in this presentation was marvelous to hear. Thank you, Jeff, for all the resources that you've given us. When you cite organizations like the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, you know, I really appreciate the resources that you shared with all of us who've been on this webinar. To learn more about organizations like that, we can easily Google them, but the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, for instance, is nhcsl.org. Also some good research that you shared from Penn State, from Texas A&M, from UT. Just really, really appreciate that. I have to be honest, I know as a trustee, I'm very focused on student learning, but don't think adequately enough at times of the impact of facilities. You know, in my single member district, we have a school that's 85 years old, and we have a school that was just built and where we had the ribbon cutting on Friday. The difference in learning in those 2 facilities is incredible. So Jeff, really appreciate your time today and helping us to think through these various issues. I think the one takeaway that I'm taking from all of this is that as part of here in the Austin ISD, where I serve on the board, we've been evaluating all of our 130 schools, and we've been assigning them 2 scores. One is what we're calling the Facility Condition Index, how, you know, the condition of the facility. But
Yes,
the score that really didn't resonate with me until today's presentation was the second score, which we call educational suitability. You know, what is the educational suitability of every facility in our district? So Jeff, I'm looking forward to going away from this presentation and taking a deeper look into the educational suitability, how it is that our facilities here in the Austin ISD are impacting learning. And I suspect that those of us who are enjoying this webinar are going to be looking forward to thinking more deeply on how it is that our facilities are impacting student learning in our districts.
Well, thank you very much, Jamie. We also look at looking at facilities. We do the exact same thing here at Facility Services. It's always important to know from a building construction and material standpoint, our Facility Condition Index, which leads us in, you know, are we going to keep working and upgrading this facility, or do we need to look at replacement? But then we look at educational adequacy. You mentioned a different term, but in the end, they're the same thing. Do the facilities meet the needs of our educational programs? It's one thing to be a good facility from a maintenance and operation standpoint. It's another to provide the most efficient and effective learning environment.
So Jeff, tell us, are you and all our friends at TASB able to assist us with such assessments?
Oh, yes, sir. Each year, we do a number of facility assessment throughout the state. We're actually currently working at about 30 districts throughout the state at the moment. It's helping them look at their facilities, look at do they meet the educational environment that they are wanting? Um, how can we help them plan for the future? We have a new program that we've put together to, on an ongoing basis, lay out priorities, lay out cost estimates, and then work with the district on an ongoing basis. Instead of coming in and doing an assessment and going down the road, we want to focus on working with our schools and our members on keeping facilities at our forefront, because it's not only important for our budget and for having a safe, secure, clean environment, it is extremely important to the education and achievement of our kids. And how do we use our facilities to provide greater opportunity that results in greater achievement?
Tremendous. Jeff Clemens of TASB Facility Services, so greatly appreciate your time today, assisting us to learn more about the impact of our facilities on student learning, but appreciate all of our partners at TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, for all that y'all are and do for our students and their families throughout the state of Texas. Y'all are tremendous champions, and we so greatly appreciate y'all.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
My pleasure. For those of us who are listening, the next two webinars are going to be on Wednesday, March the 25th. We'll have a webinar on Latinos in the 2020 U.S. Census. Leonor Vargas will be speaking with us on that timely issue of the 2020 U.S. Census. And finally, on Thursday, April the 2nd, we'll have a webinar by Patricia Nunez Porres on moving from visualizing to realizing strengths of developing bilingual students. Hope that you'll tune in for those webinars. In the meantime, I want to appreciate all who are taking advantage of this learning opportunity and to all who are making them possible. Today, we thank in a special way Jeff Clemens of TASB Facility Services and all of our friends at TASB. Y'all are doing incredible work. Let's keep up the work for the sake of our students. Have a great day.